AI and robots are going to replace our jobs. What's the truth about that?
Yes, it will. It absolutely will. And it's only going to disrupt even more jobs as it advances further and as things like humanoid robots come into place. So it really is a risk. But what's not so scary about that is I think of the ecclesiastical wisdom of there's nothing new under the sun. Everything we see has happened before. So have people been being displaced, jobs being disrupted? They have since the dawn of time.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by my good friend Christopher Lind, who's a globally recognized digital-first HR leader living at the intersection of business, technology, and human experience. He's also the author of The Relentless Intention, host of the Future First podcast, and chief learning officer at ChenMed. During the podcast, Christopher shares how AI is changing employee skills and implications for organizations, how you can stay ahead of AI changes and help your employees navigate this in the workplace, and the implications of AI on our personal identity, self-worth, and purpose. As always, before we jump into the podcast, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. With that being said, let's jump in. Christopher Lind, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing good. Things are good on the family front. Keeps me busy, keeps me young, and then things at work. I can't believe I've been at ChenMed for 3 years now. So
yeah,
we were saying last time we talked, I had just started.
Exactly. Also, for those who aren't aware, obviously you're chief learning officer there, but tell everyone a little bit about the organization for people that may not be aware of ChenMed.
Yeah, so ChenMed is a primary care company that focuses on serving underserved populations here in the US, which anybody who knows healthcare in America knows how broken the system is. ChenMed really was focused on fixing that, especially for needy populations, which is pretty cool. It's cool to work for a company where you feel like the work you're doing matters.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that's part of the attraction, right?
Yes.
How does that translate to the world? So how is AI changing employee skills? So what are some of the implications you're seeing for organizations?
You know, what's interesting about it is this is probably one of the most unsettling spaces for organizations right now, because so many people that I talk to they're not 100% sure where to place their bets when it comes to skills, both organizationally and the employees. I mean, if you think about employees right now, employees are like, what do I even focus on that's going to be relevant in 6 months? Now, what's interesting though is I think some of the stuff that I'm seeing, and even just where I'm putting my focus, things that used to matter actually still really do. If anything, they matter more. So some of these human skills, they really are the competitive differentiator. And that's one of the things that a lot of folks are still trying to figure out how, because the application of them is changing. So that's still really unsettling for people, because it's like, well,
give me an example.
Yeah, I know I need.
What would be an example of that?
So like communications, we know communication skills are still going to be really important, but we're more distributed than ever. And now we're having to interact with AI in addition to humans. And so the way we communicate is changing. And so we know that we need to focus there, but we also aren't 100% sure what flavor, and it's moving quick. Now, I think the other aspect that still is in flux is we know hard skills, like as an example, coding. If you spent billions of dollars on advancing coding skills, the last 2 years you just went, well, what just happened? Because it just vaporized almost. But what's interesting is still underneath that, there are foundational computer science skills and logic and reasoning skills that are really relevant. And so even in the hard skills, people are struggling a little bit. Well, we can't just dump coding as a hard skill, because then when the AI starts creating stuff and something goes wrong, which it will, if you watched what happened last week, it's going to throw a tantrum. We won't have the skills to know what to do about it. So we really are in a flux state right now. It's very unsettling for a lot of people.
There seems to be many blurred lines. Like you mentioned communication,
Yeah.
which is typically seen as, I don't even like to use the word soft skill, let's say a power skill. But now when you add technology in, is it still a soft skill and power skill? Because you're using AI to communicate and you're automating a lot of this as well now. So it's kind of like, it's there's a many blurred lines. Like you mentioned, like the fact now you can open up ChatGPT and code, just ask it to create something. Is that now?
Tell it what you want to do, and it'll write the code.
So is that a hard skill anymore to code? Like I mean,
and that's where it's
weird.
almost a new merging. It's almost a new merging of power and hard skills.
Oh, you got to coin a phrase, Christopher. I feel like there's an opportunity here. We need to figure out what is that. Is someone coined that? What is that? Like, is someone coined the merging of those two things? We need to figure out what
I don't know what it is, but as we're talking through this, that's been one of the biggest things that I've been focusing on. Is there is this convergence of the two where, and not only is it converging, but also we thought we were a lot better at these things than we are. And I think what we see with AI is showing that. So communication skills, as an example, we thought we were really great communicators. And then we start going, why is AI malfunctioning? Why is it doing all these crazy things? It's like, well, because you're a really crappy communicator. So when you're trying to explain to a computer what you want, you actually aren't very good at communicating.
It kind of amplifies even louder how bad you are. Like
that's what technology does.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
True.
It just amplifies your goods and your bads. And so it's like, if you're not a good communicator, AI is not going to work very well for you because you can't articulate what it is you want it to do.
Yeah.
And because AI is just a machine, it's just saying that's what you want. I'm giving you that. And your flaws will be exacerbated massively.
Mm. How are you approaching this with your CLO brain?
One of the things that I'm doing massively and driving, kind of trying to encourage everybody to do this, is going back to we often assume we knew our skills and we thought we were a lot better at it. The same is true of work. We are now being exposed to the reality that we took for granted how flexible and adaptable people are. And so there were a lot of assumptions companies made about, we didn't really know how work got done. We're like, marketing, we kind of have a general idea, but people fill in the gaps. And now, as AI is coming on the scene and people are going, well, what can be done by AI? What needs to still be done by people? All of a sudden we're realizing we don't actually know how this work gets done. So actually a lot of my time is spent deconstructing work down to a molecular level. And actually understanding, okay, if this is what's happening, what goes into it from a actions, skills, behaviors, all of that. So then we can start to deconstruct it and say, what makes sense for a person still to do? Where might AI augment it? And then where's that skill trajectory going? So we can actually build development pathways to hopefully help employees see, I know you're here and the world is changing, but if you get on this roadway, you will be future-proof.
How are you bringing the rest of the business into that? Because it's one thing you doing, and you're quite ahead of the time anyway, even from our first conversations as well. Like, are you having to kind of walk a bit slowly before you run with the rest of bringing the business on board?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I do my best not to talk about the tech at first, because it usually just results in people are just overloaded by it. And a lot of it really is just building relationships, which again, going back to power skills, relationship building, I think is going to be one of the most important skills as we move forward. So it really is building that partnership with my stakeholders and asking a lot of questions and saying, what really is happening here? Help me understand. What's the difference between this going really well and this going really poorly? And what do we think is the competitive differentiator? And what's interesting is a lot of it is building trust, because a lot of the answers to these things are, we don't know. We don't know. We might have to go ask other people. We might have to experiment with something and see if it blows up. And so that's really where I spend a lot of my time, is in that relationship and trust building, so that you can ask the tough questions and know that you'll get the responses you need to actually make progress. Because everybody wants to posture. Nobody wants to say, I don't really know what's going on. I don't have the answers.
That's a cultural thing as well, right? It's a big shift. Because,
huge shift.
I was saying that to someone, someone asked me that the other day, and I was like, one of my team members, and I could tell they didn't know, and I was like, it's okay to say you don't know. Like, that's also a very valid answer to say that. And I could see, I was like, no, like, this is the space where you can say that, right? And quite frankly, as you said, what we're talking about, the speed is moving, you can't possibly know the answers anyway, so you kind of got to be uncomfortable in discomfort and create that psychological safety for people to say, I don't know, but let's have a conversation about it.
Well, and I think that's where we're seeing a radical shift in leadership skills. And it's not that these skills didn't matter before, it's that you didn't really have to do them for things to work. You still would have outperformed other leaders had you demonstrated these skills in the past, but you could also not and get away with it. And the margin of error for leadership is so much smaller. That's one of my biggest initiatives this year is we need to radically transform the way we think about leadership and the way what good looks like in a leader, because getting that wrong has catastrophic consequences in today's age.
Well, we saw that during the pandemic, right? When we went hybrid. We spoke earlier about amplification. All of those leaders or managers that were not great, it was massively amplified when they went remote.
Yep.
Because all of a sudden they couldn't hold on to the reins in a physical location like they did before. And the skill set of what was required to be a leader in a hybrid environment is very different to the skills required for someone in person in an organization as well.
Well, and now on top of it, and what a lot of that is not being discussed right now is, as a leader, you have to support the whole person, because what we're going through now is not just, you used to kind of be able to compartmentalize, and I don't think it was healthy, but you were able to do it more. You went to work, you did your work thing, and then you went home and you had your home thing. And now in recent years, that has completely converged. Now you have AI disrupting people's complete professional identities. I mean, you have people literally going, do I even matter anymore? I was talking to somebody recently and they went to NYU's grad program and talked to the graduates, and 6 out of 10, when they asked the question, how many of you think you'll be automated? 6 out of 10 raised their hand, just like, so people are just going, I don't even know that I matter anymore, which affects you on a whole level. So as a leader, you are responsible also for supporting people through that identity crisis. And that's something that before leadership would have been more like, oh, that's not really my problem. And it's like, it absolutely is your problem, because that's how people are showing up to work. Mm-hmm. That's how they're representing themselves. That's how they're bringing the energy and attitude they have. I mean, it's serious.
Do you think that's going to get, I suppose you covered a little bit already, but what will the role of humans be at work then, as we start to become more and more focused on AI and technology? What we mentioned, some of the things obviously with the skills that you just outlined, but any of it, what would you think the overall role of humans will be at work?
One of the big AI experts out there, Noah Harari, said, and I use this a lot. He said, intimacy can only happen between two conscious beings. And so when we think about work, like, I'm okay having AI do something where it's transactional. Mm-hmm. If it's just transaction, I just need a thing done. I'm not looking to connect with someone. It doesn't matter. But if I actually want to connect with someone, that matters greatly. And so when we think about the fact that at the end of the day, most companies are still creating products for people, there's always going to be this component of, well, customers are going to want to connect with a person on some level, and AI is not going to substitute that. And I think the same is true even in the work. There's certain work where it's like, I just need a thing done, so AI can take care of that. But then there also is this cohesive tissue of, okay, but this needs to happen between two conscious beings who need to interact and problem solve and work together. And it's more than just I need this done. I need this to happen. And I think that is why we have to deconstruct work, because I don't think we really know where that exists versus the transaction piece exists. And I think that's why we have to break it down. But I mean, even just looking at what happened last week with Gemini's image generation tool and OpenAI's total schizophrenic moment for about 48 hours. we still need people involved in oversight, in decision making, in in the problem solving of some of this stuff. Because while some of the tech heads would say AI is completely capable of creativity and autonomy, it's not. Even the best AI models still need someone to mold and shape, and it requires more than just one person. You need a collaborative group of people doing that. So I think the work that's going to come is going to be much more relational. Even hard things, even hard skill things are going to become much more relational in nature. So as an example, I talk about like my instructional design team. I've had AI models that could have created better e-learning for years, long before generative AI hit the market. But there was still enough of a need that it was like, okay, well, now as we move into this age, I'm pushing my teams more. Hey, this is more about the relationships you maintain with our stakeholders, your ability to deconstruct the problem that they're going through, even just talking through them. I want you spending more time on that than going into Canva and coming up with a really creative script, or, you know, like AI can do that. And yeah, I want you to be the one who molds that.
Yeah.
But if I see you in a Word document typing something up, I'm going to go, what are you doing?
Yeah.
That's not the best use of your time right now.
100%. What can people do to stay ahead of all these AI changes? Because it's really hard. Like, there's just so much being thrown at us every single day.
I mean, naturally, I'll plug my stuff, because that's part of what I try and do is
100%.
help people filter through the noise and go, okay, this happened, but what does it mean? How should we be thinking about it? Because you can get overwhelmed with the noise of, well, I'm hearing this, or this, Google just went from Bard to Gemini. Should I do something about that? Or do I not? Like, I don't know. Do I need to go sign up? Well, I really do try and help people go, here's what this is. Here's what it means. Here's how this translates, because really things are moving very fast, and yet they aren't. They are and they aren't. And that's kind of the weird part. So some of it is actually raising your digital acumen to be able to see through the noise and go, yeah, okay, that happened, but it's actually not that different. Or this is a major, I've seen things about, oh, the next big step in large language models. And you're like, I mean, it is, but it's an iteration on what we've done, so it's not going to radically transform. Then there's other things where you're like, oh, this is going to radically change things. So I think some of it is that. I think the other thing that I tell people to really focus on is figure out the things that are within your domain. I think one thing that all this access to technology and information and all this stuff is it can lead people to think they need to know everything about everything and be a subject matter expert in absolute, and you don't. If anything, I just released a podcast last week where I said, now is more the time than ever to focus on your niche and really become, hey, this is what I do really, really, really well. I understand the problems in this space. I understand the complexity of this space. I know how to work within that space. And I know there's lots of other stuff going on, but I'm going to tap into people who are specialists in that space. And I'm not going to feel the need to be an expert, because I think that's the only way you can actually understand your domain well enough to know, hey, this is coming out. Does this affect my domain? Because I understand the problem really well. And that's where I see a lot of people who are generalists. So they don't really understand the ins and outs of things. And so, yeah, it feels that much more overwhelming, because you see a new change and you're like, is everything different now? And it's like, well, if you knew the space, you'd know, this will probably affect this, and we probably need to adjust this. But ultimately, I'm not going to get too scattered about this.
Yeah, I've been doing that. It's almost impossible to go wide and deep at the same time. Like, it's not enough time in the day. So like, I just focus on the different technologies, platforms, and apps that affect, as you said, our work and the business that we do. So I can tell you all of the latest AI platforms for podcasts that do X, Y, and Z, and all of the things for live streaming, and all of the things that for content, obviously, because we're creating Atlas Copilot. But I see all these other shiny objects outside of that, and I'm just like, okay, just ignore that. Like, that doesn't affect me, and let's just focus on things that are in my space. And I feel a lot more comfortable doing that as well, and it's easier to keep up with it as well. And also, because what ends up happening, I don't know, I'm sure you've got a really great way of describing this, but what happens is you you learn loads, you don't implement anything.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, you're a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And so
Yeah.
as a result, you stay in this 100,000 foot sphere and you don't actually execute on anything and actually learn. I mean, it goes back to the Dunning-Kruger effect. You look at what's gone on with the information age. Everybody has all this information and all this knowledge, but they haven't actually done anything with any of it.
Yeah.
And so there's subject matter experts in everything. But then if you're like, here, go do it, it's a catastrophic failure because they're like, well, I actually didn't really know.
It's fascinating, is it? Because like it's no longer everyone has the same access. Not everyone, but almost. You know, there are obviously different circumstances, but most of us have access to the internet. One thing I was going to ask you, we can't open LinkedIn without seeing the whole AI and robots are going to replace our jobs. You know, what's the truth about that in your opinion?
They will and they won't. I think that's it's both. And I'm very transparent with people about that because I hear the fear in people's voices and I don't want to say no, that's not going to happen. That yes, it will. It absolutely will. And it's only going to disrupt even more jobs as it advances further and as things like humanoid robots come into place. So it really is a risk. But what's not so scary about that is I think of the ecclesiastical wisdom of there's nothing new under the sun. Everything we see has happened before. So have people been being displaced and jobs being disrupted? They have since the dawn of time. I mean, I'm sure when the wheel came out, there were people that were like, oh my gosh, we carry everything on our back. Now this wheel comes out. What on earth are we going to do? This wheel, okay. When cars came out, people were afraid, well, who's going to now all these jobs and scooping up horse poop and all this. When electricity came out, all these jobs that existed, electricity disrupted, and AI is doing the same thing. So to me, it's one of those, yeah, if you're complacent, if you build your identity and your value on the things that you do, you are at a high risk. Yeah. If you say, I am the designer and what I do is I do this thing and I'm the best at that thing. And I'm never going to do anything else. I'm just always going to do this thing. And that's what I'm going to do really well. Mm-hmm. Then you're at a high risk of being disrupted. But if you're someone like what you described, where you go, this is what I do now, but it's not who I am and the value I bring. And I will continue learning and evolving and finding new ways to do the things I love, just differently, then you have nothing to worry about. You're going to adapt. You're going to say, okay, well, that's what I did, but now I don't need to do that anymore. And now I'm going to actually get to work on more interesting, more important work. And okay, fine.
Yeah. In most cases, I've seen it kind of empowers you to be even better at your job because I'm just automating. You know, for me, the first time I ever kind of went down this route was when I was automating a lot of my sales tasks whilst my team members were spending hours and hours and hours doing admin. I just had like bots doing everything, or I had like a little bot messaging people on LinkedIn. I had another one scheduling for me, and all my teammates are like, what's going on? We're sitting here spending hours and hours doing all this. I was like, no, I kept it quiet because I thought I'd get in trouble in the business as well, but it empowers me to focus on more valuable tasks like spending time with my team. All right. To that point.
Well, and I think that's where my advice, especially to senior leaders, because when I do advisory work on this, one of the things I always challenge people with that helps you mitigate this risk, and it's good for senior leaders and it's good for employees, is we have a bad tendency to look at this technological innovation and say, okay, how do we just speed up or improve the way we do what we're doing today? And if you only look at it through that lens, then yeah, it's going to take up more of the pie and it's going to be more disruptive and but the thing that's really unique about this technology is it's actually creating a bigger pie. It really truly is. And so I actually challenge people all the time and say, what are you not doing today that you wish you could, or that you know would be valuable if you could get to it, but you just can't? Look at those things, not just, well, where does AI, because maybe AI can help you free up time to focus on those things. Or to your point, maybe AI can free up time and can be an assistant to help you accomplish those things that you go, as an example for me, just a simple one, my Substack is not written by AI, but I would never have the time with 7 kids, being a CLO, doing all this other stuff. I would never have the time to go back through the full transcript and actually think through what are all the biggest highlights? What are all the different conversation points that I had? Yeah. Now I can just ask the question and be like, what was all in there, and surface to me the things that are most that you think stand out. And then I go, no, not that, not that. No, okay, now this jogs my memory. This is, and so then I'm working with it and then going, you know what? The magic isn't in Christopher's writing, but the magic is in the message. So it'll do a draft and then I can go, yeah, that's not how I would say it. And I actually think this is really, I would never have time to do that. But as I came into 2024, that was something where I went, you know what? People really tell me all the time, I love your stuff. I wish there was a quicker way to just get the essence of it. So I knew where to dig in. And I was like, okay, I don't have time for that. Yeah. But I knew it was a thing. And I think that's where when companies start thinking about that, it opens up a world of possibilities, not only from a business standpoint. I mean, you can grow your business exponentially, but also for the people who support your business so that you can say, hey, we don't need any less people. We're just going to accomplish exponentially more. And the ones who are here are going to be exponentially more valuable because we can't do this without you.
Yeah. I had a member of my team this morning, and we realized a lot of the editing processes were taking a bit longer than we wanted to. And we thought, okay, let's break down your time, like how you're allocating your time. And we realized that it was spending like a couple of hours removing like ums and ahs from podcasts. And, you know, there's a lot of time and we found, there's a tool that removes that immediately. An AI tool that does that straight away. I was like, there you go. Now we've saved like 8-9 hours a week just from finding a tool that does that. And then the other thing was, somebody Zoom guests that come in with terrible audio, which we all know if we've done podcasts before. And we found another tool that immediately made their audio sound like they were using an incredible microphone like this, even though it didn't. And all of a sudden we've got a couple of days back during the week. And he's like, oh wow, I've always wanted to, there's a couple of projects we wanted to do, to your point, that we never had time to get around to doing, and now we have time. So from that point of view, he's feeling more motivated, more excited, more engaged to then go and do these things. That's really what it's all about as well. And like I saw how excited he was because he was going to go work on these all projects that he never thought he'd have time to do. And I was like, hey, I think it was like end up being like $50 a month for the tools. Literally, like, that's it. Yep. Like, literally, we're not talking huge investments to do it. I was like,
you paid for that, and you paid for that and lost productivity in less than a week.
Yes,
type of a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's where I find myself being almost a corporate storyteller to help people with this, because I get it doesn't always make sense. Mm-hmm. You know, typically, if something takes something, there's less. But that's not the case. The math doesn't work that way. In this case, when AI takes something, it opens up more. And a lot of people that's a mindset shift. Again, it goes back to some of the things we've been saying long before AI, a growth mindset or a scarcity mindset. And it's like, well, but you have to help people see that pathway because they won't just by default.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. From all of the conversations you're having, the posts, the Substack, what are the main... What's some of the content that you're putting out that's getting the most attention, or topics that people like really, or questions they're asking you?
A lot of the questions I get asked revolve around, what about in this situation, or how does it work here? A lot of the questions and some of the most popular stuff that I've been doing is a lot of people are hearing a lot of the doomsday stuff.
Yeah, I know.
And
it's
it's everywhere.
I see it on LinkedIn. You go on there.
It's very like, negative. And a lot of the content that I put out helps explain that there is truth in that.
I like the way you approach that as well, because a lot of people have been like, no, they're not. I'm like, yes, they are. There's loads of jobs they're going to
Yes, they are.
Yeah, like you're not avoiding that. Loads of people are like, no. I'm like, yes, it's already happening.
Right.
It's like, what are you talking
about? So I tend to spend a lot of time explaining what the truth is, because there's truth in it. So here's an example. Eliezer Yudkowsky, I just did this on the weekly update last week. He came out and he said, the end of humanity is coming in as soon as 2 years, updating his prediction from 5 to 10.
Oh, God.
Okay, you might read that and go, oh my gosh.
He's getting his clicks.
Doomsday narrative.
Yeah, he did it on purpose.
But the wisdom underneath that is his prediction that these changes are 5 to 10 years out are now in 2. That's true. That is true. So that does shift the way you think about it. Now, it doesn't mean that the end of humanity is coming in 2 years. No, but there is wisdom in some of these doomsday narratives. Yeah. So that's what I try and help unpack for people. That is pretty popular. And then the other one is to help combat that. A lot of my most popular conversations are with people who are doing incredibly wonderful things with artificial intelligence that were impossible before. I just released an episode with someone who has cured dyslexia. What? Because we actually can see the patterns in the way people process information. And because AI can look at it at a scale that we just formerly was impossible, it now can identify the patterns and it can rewire the neural pathways. Wow. And so it's one of those things where it's like, we didn't have solutions to these problems before. Before it was just like, well, how do you mitigate? How do you get by? How do you do this? Now it's like, we can fix it. I had another episode that was really popular with someone who they've taken AI and have trained it on coughs, which you would be like, coughs?
As in like a cough?
They can diagnose up to 20 diseases by having you cough into your phone. Which, when you think about health equity, I mean, maybe in certain countries that doesn't sound like that big of an innovation, but in certain countries where somebody could have tuberculosis and the nearest hospital is 3 hours away and you're going to spread tuberculosis on the whole trip and you don't know, and then you miss 2 days' wages, which might be your family's food for those. I mean, you think about that. Now they can just cough into an app and be like, nope, I'm good. Or, oh, no, I'm not. I should make sure I'm very careful about how I get to the hospital, and I'm going to get there with a diagnosis instead of going for the diagnosis to have to go back. And I mean, it's some of those really bright spots of, hey, this actually, when used for good, is incredibly powerful. And I think that's the inspiring message that people often gravitate to. Whether we end humanity in 2 years or whether the world's a better place, it's up to us. It's up to us where it goes. And that's why I think we're going to make some horrible mistakes, but we're also going to do some incredible things. And I just hope, my goal is to try and influence people to make more of the better choices.
I don't know why all of the sort of top AI experts have this doom and gloom approach. Like, I saw did you see Sam Altman's quote recently? AI will probably most likely lead to the end of the world, but in the meantime, there'll be great companies. It's like they're all, I don't know, maybe it's because they did it for the headlines. I'm like, why they're all going down that route? Or maybe because I think fear sells.
And I think this goes back to it. I think there's a lot of people who, and for good reason, are skeptical of people. And really, that's at the driving force. And we don't have a good history. I mean, I study history. And when you look at the course of human history, we aren't always the best at the choices we make. No. And we often make really bad decisions. We often jump before we think. And we do that. And I think that's where some of the folks who see the potential and the power of this technology are probably projecting a little bit of, I've seen this movie before and it doesn't end well. And I think for me, it's more one of those like, but it tends to course correct. And again, from a worldview, I've got a different, I'm coming from a Christian worldview. So I've got a different worldview on it. But I think it's one of those things where it's like, it'll come around. We're going to make some horrible mistakes. Yeah,
we're going to make some. We already are making horrible mistakes.
We already are.
But I honestly don't feel like there's ever been a more exciting time to be alive at the same time. As well, some of the things we can do. Imagine trying to explain this to someone like even 10 years ago. They would think you're crazy to try and describe some of the things that you're just describing.
I joke recently, I'm like, we're moving into the Black Mirror age.
Yes.
Everybody who watched it when it came out, it was like, that is so ridiculous. Like, can you imagine if we ever got to that point? And you're like, that's now. What are you talking about? This is happening.
You've already got people walking around today with the new, what's the new Apple Vision Pro? You've already got people literally living in mixed reality. The fact, even with our AI, like I can't believe I can even, hey, like of the 10,000 podcasts or hours of podcasts, give me the top 10, keys to being a successful CHRO. And then it's like, there you go. immediately within seconds. And I'm like, okay, do it in this language and that language. And now send me an email of it. Now take a template. And it's like mind blown to be able to do.
But what's interesting, and this may be where people who get overwhelmed by that gives me hope in some of the consistency is. So the Apple Vision Pro is a great example. Okay. So people were walking around with this thing. The number of YouTubers spent 100 hours in the Apple Vision Pro, whatever. And when you hear them, they're like, it was one of the loneliest experiences that I ever had. And it goes back to this: technology can fill up to a certain point a void, and then there's something left. And that's where when I look at some of this stuff, I'm like, yeah, so maybe the void that we were filling before will change, but it's not coming for everything. I've yet to see anything that's convinced me otherwise.
No, I agree. Listen, I could talk to you forever, Christopher. It's so weird calling someone else Christopher when my name's Christopher, but everyone calls me Chris. So it's just Chris just saying it out loud. I only hear Christopher when I'm in trouble, and it's normally my mum shouting at me.
I know.
Parting piece of advice, and also where can people connect with you and grab hold of your content and follow you?
Yeah, so my parting piece of advice is slow down. My parting piece of advice to people would be slow down and focus on the things that matter. Because honestly, even from a job standpoint, I grew up in a funeral home. That stuff isn't what people remember you for. So yeah, it's important. Yeah, you want to focus on that, but your kids, your friends, your relationships, that stuff, that's what's going to stand the test of time, the legacy you leave. So I would say, yeah, focus on this, but don't get so focused on it that you end up missing out on the things in life that really matter. That'd be my closing advice, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed. And when you're overwhelmed, you tend to just focus on activity. And that's when the number of people I saw, they get to the end and they're like, they look back and go, shoot, I played these cards wrong. And I hope people don't make that mistake. In terms of where you can follow me, I'm all over LinkedIn. My YouTube channel is growing quick. I've got my podcast, and then on Substack.
Amazing. Well, for everyone, make sure you go and follow Christopher on LinkedIn. The links will be below. Substack, YouTube, all will be there. Man, let's not leave it so long next time. It's good catching up with you. And I wish you the best until next week.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me, Chris.